The Grieving Man. The mouth of madness. Even though I am ashamed to admit it, my hands are trembling as I am writing these lines. Memories of that fateful night came back, like a torrent of bloody water in the trenches after heavy rain. No battle in the Great War had brought upon me the feelings which overwhelmed me back then, in the ancient woods near the Great Lakes. I fought at Gallipoli under the command of General Sir Ian Hamilton. There is no telling how many soldiers, fathers, sons, and brothers have fallen before my eyes. I became numb to death. That was until I visited the sacred lands of the Ojibwe Indians. Oh, God, this shaking will not stop. I feared that trying to write this incredible tale will make me uncomfortable, but I haven't thought that I will tremble like a leaf. The night outside reminds me of that night, too. I feel the same smells of wet leaves, sulphurous swamp, and sour earth, which I felt back then. The moon seems to look the same, and to shine the same frozen dead light. And the smell of decay is lingering all around my room. I'm sure my mind is playing tricks on me. It was a few years after I came back from the war. I had been wounded at Gallipoli, and after I recovered, I decided to go to America. I've always desired to travel for reasons other than war. It seemed to be the perfect time to help my mind and soul recover as well. But instead of recovering, I've been shocked out of my solitude, and nature had always helped me clear my mind and regain my grasp on life and reality. A reality which sometimes gets blurred by nightmares and feelings of hopelessness. So, after visiting several parts of Northern America, I traveled to the Great Lakes. The boreal forests in that area are gorgeous, ancient, but also full of dark secrets. Ancient spruce trees, tamaracks, jack pines and balsam firs greeted me there. They towered above me with majestic grace. I also saw hardwood trees, like aspen and birch, but in vastly lower numbers. The forests were dense. There have been fewer and fewer trails as one went deeper into the belly of the woods. It was only the middle of autumn, but the air was chilly. I had to dress myself in thick garments. Several elderly people, some of them native, had said that they had been sensing that a particularly cold winter was coming. How were they able to know these things, is beyond me. Nevertheless, it is fascinating how these old folk seem to have a deeper connection to nature and to life itself. A lot of wisdom can indeed be accrued through many decades of struggles and hardship. So, I walked through the wonderful forests and gasped in their awe. I made quick drawings of things I found fascinating. As a child, I found out that I possessed great talent for drawing. I had lost a part of it during the war, but as I happily discovered, I could still use the pencil and paper reasonably well. It was in the afternoon that I reached an area where the vegetation seemed to be not as dense as before. After strolling some more, I saw that a small trail branched off to my right. Deep inside, I felt I should avoid it, but my naive mind and adventurous soul told me to go. And off I went, onto the side path. What a hopeless fool I was. I thought I'll have plenty of time to explore for an hour or two, then get back to the main path, and still be able to go back to my lodge before dark. With my maps and compass with me, I confidently strolled forward. Brown and yellow leaves were falling all around, covering the ground in a colorful blanket. Soon, I discovered something odd. A buck's skull had been nailed to a thick tree. It had huge antlers, and it was clear that it had been there for a long time. Perhaps the natives had placed it there as a warning, or as a deterrent. I quickly grabbed my drawing book and made a rough sketch of it. I found their superstitious nature fascinating, but also primitive. Why could they have placed it there? Of course, if there is a question, one must seek answers. So I, the curious fool I was, wanted to investigate. As I walked on the path, I saw antlers scattered around in some places. I also saw bones of smaller animals here and there. Also, the leaves seemed to have become darker, desiccated. Even those, which were still attached to the branches, seemed drained of life. All these omens should have been more than enough for me to run away, but I was curious. Looking at my watch, I saw that there was still time to go a little further. I thought that maybe I'll find some more eerie things which I can make sketches of. I wandered on, and the landscape kept slowly metamorphosing into a barren one. Deadfalls were frequent. A thin mist was curling its way around just above the lifeless leaves. It was as if the devil himself had made this land his home. The first genuine shock came when I saw the buck's head again. I stopped in my tracks and looked suspiciously at it. The tree looked eerily similar, and the skeletal head also resembled the one I saw before. I fumbled for my notebook in disbelief. After I took it out of my bag, I couldn't believe my eyes. It was the same skull. The antlers, the eye sockets, the nose, everything. This can't be, I said to myself several times. There was no way on earth that this was real. After standing there in disbelief, I finally had enough. Time to go back to the trail, I thought, and turned back. My steps were quick. I hurried as much as I could. The old wounds from the war began hurting again. It was bearable, but of course, the pain was not helping my cause. I looked up to the sky, and to my utmost horror, I saw it was already darkening outside. It was difficult to see the sky from the forest floor, but here and there I got a glimpse between the branches. The path was near. I knew it, so I pressed on. I thought I should reach the edge of the hellish area at any moment. How wrong I was. I just seemed to go deeper into it. Deeper into madness, possibly into death's embrace. My heart sank when I saw the buck's head staring ominously at me. I stood there for several minutes, trying to figure out just what kind of madness came upon me. Then I remembered the compass, which I had tucked into one of my many pockets. I took it out and looked at it with great hopes. It showed that the north was behind me, which was consistent with my knowledge. The path was leading roughly towards the north. I sighed in relief. Maybe there were two bucks' heads on the tree, on opposite sides and also which were similar to each other. It was a probable explanation, however unlikely. I walked behind the tree to see the other skull, which I had supposedly seen on my way here. But there was nothing on the other side. I looked again at the compass, as my heart beat faster and my breathing hastened. The needle slowly began moving. It made a few full circles at a considerable speed, then stopped. Now the north was in a different direction. Desperation overtook me again. I was lost. I couldn't understand how, but it was a fact. Calm down, I said to myself, you had survived a war. But even though wars are unmatched in their brutality, you know what you sign up for. You know that the chances of survival are low. A ballet most likely has your name written on it. Or maybe an artillery shell, or a bayonet. In war, you get to know the thousand faces of death. But what about an uncanny situation like this? When nature itself seems to conspire against you? Or is it madness? At the moment, I almost reached the conclusion that I'd become mad during the war, and it only surfaced during my trip. It was as if I entered the mouth of madness itself. The soil of a man's heart. I had no choice but to choose a direction and stick with it. Darkness was closing in from above and all around. I felt as the air got colder, and the smell of rotten eggs hit my nose. The ground became soggy, so I had to tread carefully. A swamp, I thought. How wonderful! What else was in store for me? As darkness covered the dead forest, the moon came around in all its freezing might. Its light was more than welcome. Most branches were devoid of leaves, so the moonlight seeped through all the way to the ground, lighting my path with eerie light. I stopped and drank from my flask. Too bad I had packed only water. A hearty gulp of whiskey or brandy might have calmed my nerves down. But, of course, I had no means to foresee such a turn of events. Also, I had no oil lamp. Fool, fool, fool. How handy would such an item might have been. I had to use nothing but the moonlight. My eyes got used to it quickly. It surprised me how well my sight adapted to the dimness. My ears were also adapting fast. They picked up even the faintest of sounds. Strange how during the night, the forest seems to come alive. As if heeding a command from above, rise. And it rises. Branches cracked in the distance, and I stopped. My breathing ceased, and my eyes darted in the sound's direction. They saw only mist and trees. The sound came again, and then again. It was as if something huge was walking among the trees. I didn't know what to do, so I remained frozen in my position. Something seemed to move in the mist several yards away, but it could have easily been that my imagination was making things up, desperate to see something. The ground became softer, the air more sour. but then I saw a faint light glowing in the distance, among the branches. My feet picked up speed, as if hurled forward by an unseen force. My joints ached, and my muscles were screaming. Taking fast, shallow breaths, I approached the light. After getting through some thorny wild rose bushes, I reached a clearing like any other I had seen. From what I saw, it had a rough, round shape. A thick, crooked oak tree was towering in its middle, and by the tree, I saw the source of the light. Scattered all around, I noticed mounds of what must have been piles of stone. They stood out with their white and gray against the darkness. A human figure was standing there with an oil lamp in his hand. Thank God, I thought, and rushed to it. As I came closer, I saw the face of the figure. A man of about 50, in worn clothing, and an unkempt face. He had a thick mustache and a face shiny with sweat. The man rested his hands on the handle of a spade, and the oil lamp was beside him on the ground. What struck me as odd was the fact that he seemed to be not at all surprised by my appearance. "What brings you to this accursed place?" His voice was coarse and heavy. I sensed some great deal of anguish in it. "Oh, thank God, I've found you, sir. I'm lost. Can you please show me how could I possibly get out of this place?" He looked at me and scoffed, then spit on the ground. His gaze darted back to the ground at a few feet in front of him. God had deserted this place a long time ago. Whatever dwells in these woods has nothing to do with God. As the man spoke, I also looked at the ground in front of him. To my horror, I noticed 4 rectangular patches. I gasped, and he noticed my stare. "If I may ask," I began, but he cut me off. "They died. My dear wife and 3 children. All of them. Typhus. I'm so sorry to hear that. It must be terrible." I genuinely felt sorry for the man. Nobody deserves such a blow. Life, however, had a way of doing it often. A branch cracked again in the distance, and I raised my eyes right away. The man didn't even flinch. He didn't even take his eyes off the dark patches. No sound came for several seconds, so I calmed down. "How come you buried them here, sir? And not in a cemetery?" My curiosity was nagging at me again. I wanted to know why had he taken such a long and perilous road just to bury them here. I was certain there had to be some kind of graveyard where he lived. "Hope, I guess," he replied without shifting his gaze. "Hope? Yes. Just wait and see. Sunap is not that far away. Until then, you will know. I can promise you that. It just became dark a short time ago. Look at your watch. I'm sure you have one." I took out my watch, which had been by my side during the war, and after it. I held it near the lamp and gasped. A few minutes past 2 in the morning. I found it hard to believe. This place has its way to play with the mind, the man said, and spat on the ground. But how? Haven't you noticed strange events or heard strange noises on your way here? Yes, I have. I thought that I'm losing my mind. You are not. Like I said, this place is cursed. Then why are you here? You'll see. There are places on this earth which should not be, yet here is one of them. Places which mock life, death, and even God Himself. They are hidden, but we always find a way to them, as if they were calling us. Then they ensnare us and devour us. They feed on our desires. Evil feeds on our desires. Evil, which grows in the soil of a man's heart. I don't understand. Don't worry. You will. Just wait until sunrise. I don't know. I'd rather get moving. I don't even know where I am. Even if you try to leave, this place will drive you nuts. Here, take a sip instead. He extended his hand toward me. In it, he was holding a tin flask, which looked battered and beaten by time and by constant use. It's whiskey. Not poison. I took the flask and drank. It was the most welcome feeling. The fiery drink caressed my throat and stomach. I handed the flask back to him, then took out my water from my backpack, which I had placed on the ground beforehand. I needed something to wash down the fire. When I put back the flask, I heard a strange sound again. It was something between a growl and a shriek, but it was far away. The man didn't flinch. What was that? I asked, but knew he will not give a straightforward answer. Strange things are roaming these woods. The Ojibwe Indians had told many tales. This used to be their land. Ojibwe Indians. I've never heard of them, I replied, but the unease was clear in my voice. Many people haven't heard of them. As they haven't heard of the Mi'kmaq, Algonquin, Wampanoag, or many others. Several tribes had lived in this area, and this place, right here, was one of their burial grounds. At least, this is what my grandfather used to tell me. What will happen at sunrise? I asked, trying to find out why the man had buried his family in this ancient burial ground. I don't know, he said, and looked at me. His face was stringent, determined. Although his eyes were hiding deep within their sockets, I felt as they were piercing into me. Old folks say this place gives hope to the hopeless. To those who had been abandoned by God. Well, as you can see, I am one of them. I don't know what hope can lie within the sour earth of this cursed place, but I am willing to find out. Stay here, and wait with me. There is not much time until sunrise, and as the old saying goes, the sun brings light upon every mystery. Will you get me out of this place after that? Of course I will. Just a few more hours, then I promise I will help you. His gaze shifted back to the disturbed earth before him, and I had to be content with the arrangement we had just made. God's forsaken. As the hours were getting closer to sunrise, I became increasingly restless. I was hungry and thirsty as well. I emptied my water bottle, and the man had no water with him. He only gave me whiskey, which I accepted a few more times out of politeness, but then declined. The grieving man did not move from where I initially seen him. I don't know how he could stay in one position like a statue, but he did. I've been a soldier, I knew discipline, but I would have found it difficult to stand in one place for hours on end. How unjust it is, he whispered. Pardon me. To be taken away like this, he continued, while staring at the ground. One day they were happy, doing their everyday things. So was one, happy as a man can be with a beautiful young wife and 3 wonderful children. Then the malady struck, and in a short time, they were no more. Condemned to the cold earth and the worms. "I'm truly sorry," I tried to say something. "It's not just that. I live while they are rotting there in the darkness, robbed of their life and happiness. Isn't it better to be glad that such wonderful people had enriched your life than to be grieving over their death? How should I not grieve for the life which once had been here with me," he said, and opened his hands in front of him. I could kiss it, touch it, love it. But now it is no more. It's only a grotesque remnant of the past. When you lose someone whom you love dearly, there is only grief and emptiness. The most beautiful memories are those which hurt the most. "I see," I said, and gazed down at the rocky ground. Grief is a dangerous feeling. It makes a man do unimaginable things. Grief is the stillborn child of love. A child without hope. There was nothing more I could say. He had lost much more than a human can endure. No matter how many wars do you survive, losing those whom you love will break you. "But here comes the sun," he said, and looked toward the cast. I looked as well, but saw only a faint glimpse of light. It was the very beginning of morning, barely noticeable. The branches were cracking again, this time closer to us. A growl sounded between the misty trees, but I could not determine the precise direction it was coming from. I looked at the man and saw that his eyes were probing the ground in front of him. What in the name of God is he doing? I asked myself. Does he really think that his loved ones will arise from their graves? He took the oil lamp from the ground and held it above the freshly disturbed patches of earth. I looked at the ground, then up at his face. I repeated this several times, but saw nothing. A branch cracked again, and I heard a sniffing sound. As if a terrible predator was searching for blood. "There! There! Look at the ground!" He shouted in exultation, fell to his knees, and placed the lamp beside him. I looked and saw that the earth, which covered one of the patches, was moving. The man began digging with both hands like a lunatic. Panting and growling with the effort, he tore at the soil with an unholy frenzy. I gasped when I saw that something was indeed moving just under the earth. A pair of hands appeared, ashen white and blue. My strength left me, and I didn't know what to do. Whatever I saw, it must have been some kind of nightmare, or worse. Soon a head and face appeared, as the man cleared away the soil. I saw a face which possessed a deathly pallor, but its eyes were alive. His wife, I thought as I realized the face was that of a woman. She was slowly making her way out of her own grave. As I looked at the other graves, I saw hands appear in all three of them. The children. Oh, my dear God! How could this happen? I slapped myself several times, hoping to wake up from some nightmare, all sweaty and breathing heavy. But I did not wake up because I was already awake. Although I wished I was not. Even being in a bloody war was a better fate than witnessing this ungodly abomination. A sacrilege to life and the Almighty. The woman got out of the grave, and the man embraced her. She caressed his back, and he whispered something to her while the children slowly shambled out of the earth. The man was crying as he was talking to his dead wife. I saw the look on the woman's face, and it was blank. A primal, empty stare was painted on the deathly pale skin. All her motions seemed to be mechanical. As if there was no consciousness behind them, only the most primitive urges or habits learned while being alive. I began backing away just as the children crawled out and hugged their father. This was when the woman bit hard into the man's neck. He screamed, but it was too late. He was being held in the lay embrace of death itself. They all began biting into his flesh, and he fell onto his knees while crying his wife's and children's names. Sometimes he called out to God, but as he had said before, God was not there. I turned to run in the opposite direction, but a loud growl stopped me in my tracks. An awful smell of decay and blood hit me, and I saw in the distance the shape of a formidable creature. It was nothing like I had seen before. Although I could not discern the details, it was at least 20 feet high. Huge antlers covered its skull, and it looked slim, emaciated. The creature was towering above me on two legs, unlike other animals, which were walking on four. It growled at me, and I smelled its horrid breath full of death and sulfur. After almost falling on my buttocks, I began running again, but away from the monster. This brought me close to the oak tree again, and where the man had dug the graves. I tried to run around, but to no avail because I felt a cold jerk on my left hand. The dead woman grabbed me and shrieked like a demon from the depths of hell. She sank her nails into my flesh, drawing blood, then sank her teeth into my forearm. I pulled at the hand with significant force while I screamed like a banshee. I freed my hand, but a small chunk of my muscle and skin was torn off. The pain pulsated in my hand, but I kept running. I heard the shrieks and the deep growl behind me. The revenants and the creature were after me. I was glad that I had taken my backpack off because it was much easier to sprint without it. I did not know where I was running. I just wanted to reach the woods and get lost between the trees. Fortunately, this happened quickly. The clearing was not that big, so I reached the forest. It was difficult to navigate between the trees and bushes while mist and darkness were clouding my vision, but I had no choice. Faith and instinct were guiding me, just like they had done in the battles with the Turks. I was confident that they will help me once more. I prayed to God for it. Even if God had abandoned this place a long time ago, there was a chance He might hear my prayers. The terrain became steeper, and I found it increasingly difficult to proceed. I heard the sounds made by my chasers from closer and closer. Small trees were falling or snapping as the towering creature was running after me. Its heavy footsteps were reverberating in my ears. I was already gasping for air and grunting like a beast when I felt no more ground beneath my feet. A vast chasm of darkness and rumbling lay below me, and I stepped into it. I was screaming as I fell, but soon felt the lay waters of a river. This was the last sensation to reach my mind. The river was shallow. I hit my head on the bedrock, then passed out. The water carried me, who knows for how long, until a tribe of natives rescued me. I was on the brink of freezing to death, but they helped me. They brought me to one of their tents and lit a great fire. For a few days and nights, I've been in and out of fever filled with nightmares, but they nursed me back somehow. When I awakened, I tried to tell them my story. It was difficult, as we didn't speak each other's languages. At one moment, one of them had pointed to the wound on my hand, which seemed to heal way too slowly, and was also black on the edges. I tried to explain how I got it, and after some struggle, they seemed to understand. All of them in the tent, including the elders, looked at me with wide eyes. With horrified looks on their faces, they kept repeating the same word to each other, Wendigo, Wendigo.